Good afternoon, everyone, and
I'm
welcome.
just, you know,
Welcome to our main policy committee meeting. We have a robust agenda today. We're gonna get it going on. We're gonna start with 1.01. I'm gonna hand the floor over to our deputy superintendent, Ed Fortune.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. As we enter into this month's policy committee, we're going to start with wellness. Caitlin Lazarski, our Director of Food Services, here, and she's going to share with you the evaluation that was conducted on food service and how our policy aligns with our score. Okay.
So every 3 years, the USDA requires that the wellness policy, the district's wellness policy, is evaluated and revised if needed. And so I was able to take our wellness policy and put it through the calculator, which is provided by the Rudd Institute. And what you have a copy of is the scores for each section. And basically it goes through each section of the wellness policy. The wellness policy is a one-page policy with a 13-page regulation. So, so basically the regulation are the details of how we're going to conduct each section of the wellness policy. And so this scorecard actually goes into detail on each section of the wellness policy and tells you if we are meeting the goals, meeting or exceeding the goals. So a score of 1 means that we are meeting not the goal, but we are meeting the standard for the policy. And a 2 means that we are being very specific and we're setting goals under that policy. If we have a 0, that means it's not addressed in our policy. So we did pass. Our overall score for the policy was the score of comprehensiveness was 93. And the total strength was 72. So there are areas that we could potentially improve. I'm not going to go line by line, but I will pull out the ones that are like the 1s and 2s. So under nutrition education, we scored at 1 for any 3, 4, and 5. That says that each level, each elementary, middle, and high school students receives sequential and comprehensive nutrition education. When you do the calculator, yes, we address it, but there's no written curriculum. So if we had written curriculum for every grade level in nutrition education, then we would be exceeding the regulation policy. But we address it. We just don't have every single grade level with a curriculum. The next section was the standards for the USDA child nutrition programs. We scored 1 instead of 2 in SM 6, 7, and 10. We address these issues in our policy, but we don't state specific numbers or strategies. So for instance, one of the standards is addresses amount of seat time students have to eat school meals. Our policy states we will provide adequate seat time to eat meals. It doesn't say every student will get a minimum of 30 minutes to eat. So we could strengthen the policy by adding a number. I should also mention that when we did go over this in committee, in wellness policy committee, or wellness committee, I'm sorry, the committee members did not recommend any additional changes to the policy. So they felt that it was strong enough as is. The section for nutrition standards for competitive and other foods and beverages, we did score 0 in a couple of sections. That doesn't make us non-compliant, but those are things that we could potentially look to add to policy if we decided to do that next year. Addresses food and beverages containing caffeine in the high school level. It is allowed. We do not prohibit it. So if we wanted to go above and beyond, we could prohibit it. Nutrition standards, and we recommend that foods and beverages served and sold to students after the school day meet a certain requirement, but we do not mandate that. So that was a score of 0. Again, food served as a reward and recommendations for food served in class parties and celebrations. We recommend what we think is appropriate, but we do not put limits on what those items are. Those are just areas where we could potentially move the needle if we felt like that was a policy that we could actually monitor and adhere to. Physical activity section addresses physical activity breaks during schools, and it talks about joint or shared use agreements for physical activity participations at schools. So again, we mention it. We say that we encourage physical activity breaks during the school day, but we don't say it's mandated. We don't recommend, we don't have a certain amount of time that's recommended. And we encourage shared use agreements for the community for our facilities, but we don't have like an open door policy. So like I said, that scored us at a 1. We also do not have a safe routes to school program, but we also don't have community schools necessarily. So it's a little different for here. Wellness promotion and marketing, we got 100. So that was a really great section. And evaluation and communication. The one section that we scored a 0 in was addressing an establishment of ongoing school building level wellness committees. So we do have the district's oversight and wellness committee, but we don't have building level wellness committees. So if we wanted to encourage that, or if that was something that the district wanted to start implementing, then we could add that into the wellness policy. But right now it's not there. And we are doing some really great things around wellness. There was a lot of talk in our policy, or our committee meeting about the great things that are happening with the FACE team and in some of the schools with partnerships with Mount St. Mary College and interns. And there's a lot of great programs that are happening around health and wellness and nutrition in the schools. So we do have a list of things that we have done. And then the goal is that we meet again in June to set a schedule for next year for committee and go over some goals to start on for next school year.
Thank you. Any questions, Madam President?
No, I read through this before and came, and congratulations. I mean, this is hard work, and you've been doing really a great job. I have one thing to say. It was hard to understand without you starting out saying 1s and 2, what 1s and 2 meant. So if you're ever going to make this public, just put a little legend in to say what 1s and 2s and 0s are.
I actually did a notes page, so maybe we'll just attach that as notes so that
It was really great information, and finally, you know, when you finally look at the end, you say, "Oh, yeah, that
we did okay."
Number 2 is doing really well." So, yeah, thank you.
Okay.
So I would just like to say, Caitlin, I appreciate the work you put into this, and it's just some of the areas where you said we can do better. I would hope that we really try to do better. And I just have one question I need to ask, because I've been bombarded in public lately and I don't have an answer to this. So menus, choices, are the kids included in menu preparations or what food we offer? Because I'm hearing so many things in the community that's really, I gotta be perfectly honest with you, it's almost pissing me off. It's like, they're telling me X, Y, and Z and I know better, but where is this coming from? They're saying that some kids don't like the choice of foods that we have. Are they a part of the process of selecting our menus?
So not selecting our menus per se. You know, we do have guidelines that we have to meet for USDA. One of the things that we really try to do, especially at the high school levels, is make it so that it's bars. So they come up and they select, you know, they'll have a deli bar. There's all different deli meats, there's different toppings, vegetables, different breads and spreads and all this, and like kind of like, I don't say like Subway, but you know, they make it all to order. We have a Chipotle station, like a salsa station, same thing, where there's a variety of proteins and vegetables and things. So we try to make it so that they can customize their own.
Right.
The elementary level, we have 7 different options. In the middle school level, we have 9 different options every day. So there's options. Are they involved? They can make those choices, but they're not involved in the menu planning process necessarily.
You answered my question. And I know when I was in school, we didn't have a modicum of that. So
Yeah.
I know where it's coming from now. It's just people want to have something to say that's negative.
But they can absolutely come to Wellness Committee. We are always looking for members in the Wellness Committee. So
I'll make sure to put that out there. Thank you.
you're welcome.
Hi.
Hi.
I do want to just follow up with, on health and wellness. You brought up Mount St. Mary's. And so I actually just reached out to them just to kind of, because someone told me that they, in the past, have done some things with us. So I reached out to their athletic director. And long story short, after one conversation, my girls' lacrosse team played a game there the other day. And they have opened up their doors to us. And they're also helping us with the block rendering.
Okay.
So, and then another one, and this is kind of probably a little selfish on my end, trying to utilize some of the community resources, because that's a part of that. The Park and Rec Department. I actually reached out to that person, and they have opened up their doors to, obviously with insurance properly done. We played our first home baseball game at Delano the other day, and they are like, and it's like a small little, it's a small, like, it almost looks like a minor league park, you know? And I heard through the past, it was a bad scene. I did hear that. But the person has some new staff there now, and it's cleaned up, and it's really.
They've been
nice.
doing a lot of work, and we
And they want to,
partner with
and they
them.
want to do more.
summer.
The guy was like, just call me, you know, so I'm on your wellness committee.
So just to ask on that, dovetail on that, was there a quid pro quo for the use of baseball stadium for the pool during the summer?
I didn't bring that up yet, but I will.
I've already been asking, so.
I will find out. I'll find out.
And as to the curriculum,
I'll ask.
we will be reviewing the phys ed curriculum on the 16th, our professional development day, and then we'll move on to the health curriculum shift and fold in wherever we need to update and address. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie.
Thank you. May I add?
Yeah.
In terms of the build, great job. In terms of maybe the building wellness committee, perhaps we can have, that's something we can strive for in September. And a way to get the students involved, perhaps it can be a voice on the committee.
And what would be wonderful is if someone from that committee would then funnel that information up to the district health committee.
Absolutely.
That's a great idea. Thank you.
Thanks for exploring.
Great. Thank you.
So we have items 1.02 through 1.20, and our finance assistant superintendent, Kimberly Roaring, will be presenting with us.
Thank you, Mr. Forget. Item 1.02 is an amendment to the regulation around budget planning. Most of these amendments are just cleanups. There are items that clarify how we're doing our processes and procedures, or updates to comply with what we're moving forward with, say around the internal claims order.
Okay.
So as we go through them, I'll just quickly touch on the modifications, but most of them are to update the policies to speak to what we do.
So to my board members, would you prefer her go through all of them and then come back for questions, or do you want to go questions after each bullet?
Well, I've read all of them and they look like basic language changes,
Okay.
not, there's nothing that in the meat of any of these that were real changes.
Just wanted to give you opportunity. Mr. Wolf?
No, I'm fine. You good?
Okay. Ms. Warren?
So we cleaned up the regulation for budget planning. Item 1.03 is around budget transfers. Operationally, this generally sits more with my office than it does with the superintendent. So we're adding language or their designee to align with how we practice on a day-to-day basis our finance administration. Item 1.04, investments. This is a cleanup policy. It reflects the correction in title. It also codifies the district's or the board's authorization for us to invest with my class, because that was not part of this. And it also speaks to the partnership and collaboration between myself and the district treasurer in making investment decisions for the district.
Ms. Warren, just for the application, I know this is being fired up. Can you explain what a cleanup means? That is.
So each year we take a look at our policies and we make sure that our policies reflect our procedures. And that the procedures reflect the policies. So we're doing a marrying of those two this year. Kind of in wholesale around the finance things. This is the end of my first year with the district, and we just wanted to, now that we've taken a look, we've done our standard operating procedure manuals, make sure that we've got the policies and our procedures in alignment.
Thank you.
Item 1. Sorry, Mr. Williams.
No, that's okay. Excuse my ignorance. But when we're talking about, investments, you know, what might that include? Investing in what? Say?
So, school districts have a lot of restrictions around the types of investments that we can utilize. We have to use ones that are very secured and guaranteed, so to speak. So there are a couple of, investment groups, and is one way to qualify them. There's the New York Liquid Asset Fund, and then there's NICLAS, and these organizations allow us to have continuous liquidity of our assets, while we are able to earn a much more significant interest rate on those dollars in the interim period between when we deposit them and when we actually need them. We also do certificates of deposit in certain circumstances. Some of the short-term rates have been very good this year, so we've been doing that a little bit more. Some of the other items that we could do would be like US Treasuries, things that are really guaranteed funds, because we can't risk taxpayer dollars.
All right, that's fine.
And the Schedule A is very limited in terms of the, like, you can go, even though you can probably do others, but they're less secure.
Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
That help.
Oh, yeah.
That's an attachment.
Item 1.05 is around fund balance and reserve funds. We have updated some of the language in here to align with some changes the state comptroller did in terms of his definitions. So we've changed unrestricted to unassigned, making sure we're including our consultation with legal counsel around how we establish and maintain our tax tertiary reserve, just some of those codifications of how we're doing that work, to really make sure that it's clear, because these are publicly shared documents.
Thank you.
Item 1.06 is an amendment to our authorized signature policy. This includes specific language around deputy treasurer and extra classroom. We want to make sure that all of that is clear and concise. So we've added very specific language at the top around the responsibilities of the extra classroom treasurer and their authority to sign checks. It's more than just the treasurer and the deputy treasurer. So it's just cleaning that up a little bit. The next one codifies an efficiency we've been able to realize this year around our online banking. We are able to make remote check deposits. That really is a step not just in being more efficient, but also limiting the steps it takes to get the money from our receipt into the bank, and the hands that touch it in that process. So we wanted to update the policy to reflect that practice. Item 1.08. Okay, 1.08. And that's the inventories and capitalization procedure. So we've just updated that to reflect who's responsible for different rectifications to that database. So we have the property control manager, but we also have a separate database that's maintained by our technology department for all our technology devices. And they maintain that separate database that goes to our internal auditors and external auditors for documentation. Okay. So it's a shared responsibility. The next one is reflective of the decision the board made recently around the internal claims auditor and the reporting, the steps and the procedures that she's going to execute, but also the format of the report that she's going to be providing to you. So this is an updated exhibit to reflect the changes in that report that you'll see on a monthly basis.
Thank you.
The next one is fiscal accounting and reporting policy 6600. This again is updating some of the titles that are referenced in the policy. We also talk about the fact that we have to file our corrective action plan with the Commissioner of Education, not just the audit itself. So we're making sure that all the steps in that process are codified here. And the fact that we now are posting as required all of our external audit reports and corrective action plans on the website. Next one is our external audit. Order the fund. 15.6. So this is just clarifying that we're talking about the external audit. It said an annual audit in the policy before. We want to differentiate between the internal audit and the external audit that the district's subject to each year. We also talk about the fact that not only does the board accept this, but we also submit this to the Commissioner of Education as required. And then looking at how we want to quantify or specify how we're going to deal with the RFP process. And if we were to continue with the same audit firm beyond a 5-year period, it may be prudent for us to be looking at a switch in partner just to have that fresh lens on it. Dr. Matt. Petty cash. Okay. Our petty cash policy was needing to be updated based on our current procedures. The Newburgh Free Library receives a larger sum each year in their petty cash than the $100 that was specified in the policy, so we wanted to document that accurately. We also talked about ramifications, I guess is the word I would use, for failure to comply with the regulations around the use of petty cash, the reconciliation, making sure that we are made whole at the end of the year. If those procedures are not followed, then there would be a consequence relative to petty cash going forward. And that is reflected at the end of this policy.
Thank you.
Is that for the entire year? Or the dollar petty cash?
It is, but it revolves. So as they spend that down, they return the receipts to us as a reconciliation. We verify that there's a total still of $100 there between what was spent and what's in hand.
Okay,
And then we refresh their $100 for the next little period of time.
thank you.
This one, internal audit. So what we have seen with our internal audits and our annual risk assessment is that there's a much stronger look at our technology and cybersecurity lens. So we have just updated this to reflect that that is now a central component of the annual internal audit that our independent internal auditor completes every year and advises us on that. We also talk about the RFP process that we would go through at least 5 years to select that independent firm to do that work.
Okay, thank you.
Medicaid compliance is the next one. This is really just an update in terms of titles of the individuals responsible for this work. The next one is 6690. It's the audit committee. And here we're differentiating that this is actually a board committee rather than a district committee. So we've updated the language here to reflect that it's the board's audit committee.
Thank you.
The next one is our purchasing policy, 6700. In large part, this is really an update to reflect the board's appointment of an acting purchasing agent who has the authority of the purchasing agent when the purchasing agent is not here. That was formally established in last year's organizational meeting. And that person does act on the purchasing agent's behalf and they are not able to be here. So we're adding that distinctly to the policy so it's clear and codified that there are two individuals that possess that authority to do that work. We're also speaking to the purchasing through cooperatives, which is something the district does regularly, and we wanted to make sure the policy reflected that. The next one is around purchasing authority, and that too is an update to reflect the acting purchasing agent position. The acting purchasing agent's absence. Item 1.18 is policy 6741, that's contracting for professional services. So as we've been going through some of our reviews with SED, they've advised us of some very specific provisions they'd like to see around contract language and things of that nature. So we're looking at how we're doing it. The purchasing agent is actually the individual who's responsible to create and publish any RFPs and RFPs. That's not done by the Assistant Superintendent for Finance. So we've clarified that here. We're also talking about very specifically the scopes of services and deliverables that are going to be provided. And that needs to be documented in the contracts, not just a purchase order that's issued as a result of an RFP or RFP award. And that we do these things as soon as we're at that threshold that's set by general municipal law of $20,000. We're also going along for the maintenance of these files electronically and not strictly in a hard copy format. The next one is 6830. It's a regulation update for expense reimbursement. We did make a change to this, this regulation last year. This year, the proposed update to the regulation is to also follow the IRS per diem rates for where the conference or out of area travel occurs. So that is kind of just in tandem with the IRS mileage rate that we use and other things that we tie back to from their perspective around reimbursements for out-of-pocket expenses. And the last one is around disposal of district property. This is an update to maintenance of the capital inventory and when adjustments are made to that. It also specifically references an example of a public online auction site that we may be able to use in terms of disposition for finding it for funds in the event that it's something that could be salvaged and have value.
Thank you. Report, President, 1.21.
Yeah, we'd like permission to have this adopted on first read at the next meeting.
Yes.
It's your section.
Oh, now we're at section 1.21.
Yes, so at our last policy meeting, we began conversations with regards to policy 5411. It is our intention that we finish up those conversations and understand what the board's wishes would be should the board wish to adjust policy 5411. It's not my recommendation, it would be the board's.
Okay, so based on our last meeting, we had some discussions around 5411. We had a conversation with the athletic director, Dr. Farrell. If you want to expand, if you want to bring anything.
Yeah, so to go back on, after reading into the policy, actually working with a couple of kids on their situation this year, dealing with a few parents on the situations. One of the things that I would like to see, because I think it can still stay in bounds with your policy, with our policy, but it would also give a student opportunity also, because I think that's what I heard you even bring that up.
Yeah.
So like, for example, some of the kids have rebounded to the point where they're like an A student now, and they can't participate. So I think one of the things that, athletics is a part of the academic program, and it's also a care for a lot of kids that, it helps them come to school. I think one of the things that I would like to see, if we could look at it, is, okay, if you fall below that 85%, when you come into the fall, you are ineligible, but we will let you have eligibility, but you will have to maintain a 90% attendance rate for the up to the first marking period. And that will be checked weekly. So it's basically 100% on the student, 100% on the student, that they will maintain a 90%. When that first marking period grade is verified, if they have a 90% attendance rate, they are now fully eligible back into the program, like every student that's eligible. Nothing changes, no extra sanctions on them. And I think that gives the opportunity for that student that, for whatever issues they had previous, now they have an opportunity to at least participate. And it's on them.
Okay. The support.
How do you address postseason attendance?
Is following what we're following now.
So you're going to mandate the football player who you're allowing that didn't have an 85% attendance to participate as long as during the football season they have maintained a 90%. After the football season's over, are you still requiring that student's attendance to be checked?
Their attendance should be checked. Yes.
That's not what I asked. Are you mandating?
Yes.
Monitored by who?
If it will be monitored the way we monitor it now.
So.
And what if this?
90%, excuse me, at the 90% or the 85%?
If they flow through and follow through with the 90%,
Right.
they would be in the 85%.
Okay, so I guess
Let me-
my,
Yeah,
go
let me
ahead.
finish my question though. So now it's, the football season's over, we're in postseason, and we have evidence to believe that's where we have attendance problems with our students because they're no longer connected and engaged to come during football season, and this is when instruction really revs up.
Right.
So what happens in the second, the third, and the fourth marking period to encourage those students to continue with an attendance rate? And who's going to manage and monitor that
Yeah.
system? That's my question to you,
Yeah.
if you do this.
So I think the only students that, and this is the unfortunate part, we only monitor the active athletic
That's the
students.
problem.
That's the issue. So the athletic department really would not have the capability of monitoring non-athletic students in the winter or the spring if they don't participate.
And I understand that. I understand the question that Mr. Borges is asking also. But it goes back to a conversation I had with the superintendent when we talked about the possibility of year-round stipends.
Of what?
Dr. Farrell, responsible.
Dr. Farrell had year-round stipends for coaches so that they can be responsible for that monitoring of that attendance and the behavior. And they get that extra stipend to do that as a year-round as opposed to a seasonal.
The other piece is, first of all, this obviously, Chris has a vested interest in athletics. However, from my perspective, this involves all of our extracurricular
Absolutely,
activities,
yes.
and also our fine and performing arts,
Yes.
which are year-round, not
Right.
just season. However, one of the suggestions I have, if we are able to do this, the student falls off freshman year. They start sophomore year, fourth quarter, and achieve the 90% attendance rate, which then makes them eligible second quarter to participate. If they fall below the 85 at the end of the season, they are then again ineligible for the following year. So perhaps we can build an incentive in that documents that very clearly, because we believe in restorative justice. We believe in second chances. We believe in participation in school spirit and SEL activities. But you've gotten a chance to remediate your attendance. You've now again documented that you cannot sustain it, then you're again ineligible, and perhaps you don't get the second chance.
Okay, Dr.
Just a
Campbell.
thought.
Dr. Campbell.
Thank you. So I want you to discuss what you and Mr. Hodge, Dr. Farrell, last week I asked them to engage in a conversation about year-round coaching.
Mhm.
So perhaps if you can share a little bit of that.
Sure. We talked about the fact that many of our athletes could benefit, and those of our students who wish to become members of athletic teams could benefit from out of season and perhaps year round, if we can provide the funding for it, activities which increase their ability to participate successfully in team sports. We've talked about identifying activities that would be universal cross training for all sports. We've talked about how we would involve coaches and what additional stipends might be necessary to support those programs, if indeed there would be a sufficient facility and space, how we would engage both our team members as well as students who would like to try out for the team in the future in these activities. The long-range goal, as our CTE construction moves forward, as welding moves out of the space it's currently in, we can retrofit about 8,000 square feet and turn that into a state-of-the-art facility center for our district and our athletes, as well as our other students and perhaps community members moving forward.
So it'll be like a physical fitness center.
Right. Coach Hodge is going to be working with our current coaches to identify the types of activities, the periods of time they think would benefit our students most to be engaged in this, and also have some very, very preliminary conversation about what they might perceive to be an attractive financial package that would engage them. That does not necessarily mean the district would be able to honor that preliminary conversation for financial packaging. But certainly if they were going to be engaged in additional activities, there would be additional and incremental stipends. Our health teachers and our phys ed teachers who do not coach, as well as some of our other staff, might be interested in participating also. So this would not be limited just to coaches. It would be open to all who would follow the training period, and it would be open to all students.
Madam President.
I like that idea. I have a question on bullet number 5.
Go ahead.
Can I get to that, or do you want me to wait?
The principal will ensure.
Yes. I think every 5 weeks is too long. I think kids can slip through the cracks very quickly. And after 5 weeks, if they get a number of zeros on quizzes or missed work, and maybe 50s, to bring that up is very, very hard. So 5 weeks is too long to allow kids to slide back. So my suggestion would be every week, or at the minimum every other week, because I really see that kids could really hurt themselves by getting a number of zeros and a number of 50s very quickly.
Well, and also attendance, if our support staff is meeting with our students who have less than sterling attendance every 2 weeks, hopefully that can be nipped in the bud too.
Yes, absolutely.
And that was really based on like the midterm times, that 5 weeks. That's probably too long.
That's too long.
That's too long, yeah.
Mr. Walker.
Yes, I'm just want to repeat the aria and soliloquy I have been singing for the last 6 years here. And I think that this program is excellent. What I would like to see is that it's somehow transferred into the classroom. I have said repeatedly that 11th and 12th graders who have not done very well, once, if given the proper guidance and a set of outcomes and consequences, they will respond just the way as so many of our athletes are responding. And I would like to see if there's a way that we can perhaps make sure that we do that. The thing about 11th and 12th graders is if they know they screwed up, and you say you have screwed up, but I offer you a way out of it, but if you don't meet me more than halfway, I'm done with you. Most of them will rise up, just like we're seeing here with the athletic program.
I think that is so important and that we take the onus off of sports, and we must let everyone understand this is all extracurricular activities. And I think that I don't want anyone to think that, when we started this conversation, it was about making it the standards simpler or easier. No, it's necessary for you to be in attendance. You need to be in school. You need to pass your grades. But I think it's important for us as a district to assist the children in understanding where they are, where they may come close to that line, and understand what it's going to take to allow them to participate. Like, my biggest problem was coming into a year and being totally ineligible based on what happened last year. But I think what you're talking about in regards to being on probation for that first marking period allows the kid to puts the onus on that scholar athlete to do what they're supposed to do. But one of the things I think we should be mindful of, Mr. Hodge, these conversations need to be had with the parent.
Oh, yeah,
parents too.
we will have a parent.
We have to have parent engagement and parent involvement with this, Mr. Forger.
So just 2 things, and I do agree with what you're saying. However, the way I read this, first working period athletes are not eligible if they don't meet it,
Based on last year?
based on what I'm reading.
That's not fair. But
Well, no, they will be, they can participate,
but that's not what
they
it
just
said.
have to maintain a 90%.
That's
No.
that has to be
But they
reworded.
haven't earned the
That's
90
not what
yet.
this
That's
says.
not
That has to be
what it says.
reworded.
Right.
That's not what this says.
Has to be rewarded.
So that
What you're saying is, if I had a.
So you'll need to maintain a 90%.
We have
Hold on a second,
protocol.
please, one conversation. Hold on.
Floor is on me. That's the protocol. So as I review this, I'm seeing first marking period sports are not
Extracurricular.
are not sports extracurricular, end of day,
Right,
non-academic programs, right?
okay.
They're only allowed to participate after they've demonstrated during the first marking period that they've achieved a 90% attendance. So our full sports students are not eligible. my question would be, what standard are we going to hold for those particular sports to give them that same opportunity to participate in fall sports?
So basically you're referring to that second
Second
one.
one.
Yes,
Yes. So how do we fix that, Mr. Haas? Because
because you have to have a similar standard for.
for everyone,
students.
and that's what we
Entire-
ran into before, because the first semester sports or academic or,
Mr. Howard and I have dealt with this for many years.
yeah,
The hardest part about creating this opportunity is the management and oversight of this particular component. But I want to go back to something you also said. Students need to know where they stand with their particular performance. Onyx Peterson has now updated Infinite Campus so that, and they are finishing up the program, that the students very soon will know on a daily basis what their percent of attendance is on that day. So they can go in and check it anytime they want. She's almost there.
yeah. So can I share something with you real quick? So in reference to this, I had a conversation, actually it was more than one parent, they were saying, when they talk about the 85% rule and how that made them ineligible for the entire year. Conversation was, and when I heard it, I was like, that makes kind of some better sense, because if you're not maintaining your attendance, there's a problem. There's a major problem. And let's not wait until September and say, oh my God, I was ineligible last year. No. But someone said to me that 80 to 85 range, 80 to 85, which is relatively close, be able to have the superintendent make a call on 80 to 85 call based on academics, based on what that appeal looks like. If you're below that, then you didn't really try. But that 80, 85 buffer, like some kids were made ineligible for an entire year and had 83.9 or 84. Go ahead, Mr. President.
So remember, the New York State Public High School Athletic Association is 80%.
Right.
It's 80%. As a board, we agreed that we needed to heighten that
Correct.
based on our attendance rates.
But what I'm saying is, since the state is 80, 80 to 85 should be an appeal.
It's 9 days.
It's a lot.
That is a lot.
It's 9 extra days.
And chronic
80 to 85.
absenteeism is 10%.
Dr. Farrell.
Suggestion. Perhaps if the board chooses to consider making changes, perhaps for fall sports, for a student who has been ineligible as a freshman, perhaps the fourth quarter of freshman year would have had a documented 90% attendance rate to be eligible for sophomore first quarter. Perhaps, just a thought. And if we are able at some point to go to year-round training programs, perhaps one of the things we could do is mandate 90% attendance in a training program for athletic purposes during the summer. Perhaps. And not polished thoughts, just raw thought.
How does that support the academics?
Well, the academic appeal is different than the attendance rate.
Mr. Ford.
I'm speaking
students
only
need
to
to
the
be-
attendance portion.
So
right
you're
now.
addressing attendance in an athletic-based program. Lauren, how does that address a performing arts student?
No, it
Number
doesn't.
two.
And again, it's a very, very raw material here.
It's very rough. So
Yes.
let's think them through.
Mr. Walker.
Listening to this and not being a sports person, okay, I'm impressed by the focus on our student athletes. I believe that this attendance rate program, if it's somehow brought into the classroom as well, that we would see a difference in the performance, because you essentially put the ball into the student's court, which is what they need by the time they are 16 to 17 years old. And I know I'm off subject here, but I have to keep going back to this, because they will, most of them will respond as long as they know they have something to respond to. That's all.
Okay,
No, go ahead. You can respond to him and then I'll.
okay, so I guess my question is there any way that we can do real-time monitoring? I.e., instead of a child who had 84, 83% last year being ineligible for the entire school year for the next year, can we put these children on real-time monitoring that they must stay at 85? If you dip below 85, then you're not eligible for the next game. You're not eligible going forward until you get it back to 85. You can't do that?
No, I'm saying we don't do that.
Oh, but I'm saying that that's more real-time compliance, and you know, it doesn't impact you, you know, in September, in February. It's like if you're maintaining the 85, if you're playing in the season, or you're playing in the band, or if you're in drama, whatever you're in, and they have access to know where they are now, based on what you said Onyx is doing. You know, if you dip below, it's going to cause you the next performance or the next game or what have you. And doing it in real time as opposed to from last year. Okay.
Yeah, I just want to go back to what Mr. Walker said. You are 100% right. The external monitor that the board hired has identified this should not be a policy 5411 strategy. This should be an ongoing strategy for every student in this district. Every student should have their attendance kind of monitored. And when students are not attending, we should be addressing them through an attendance strategy to get them into the class. But that should be based upon the school administration, the guidance counselors, and the teachers to make sure those kids are available for instruction in the classrooms. I agree with you 100%, and that's what that monitor has been telling us.
Madam President.
I think, I want to get back to your appeals process. I think we have appeals process in a number of other venues that we do. We have appeals process for registration, for superintendent's hearings. We have appeals process for a lot of things. I think we have to teach kids that they can appeal and then grow through that appeals process. And I think if we really think out an appeals process and balance it so that the student has an opportunity to advocate for themselves.
Yeah.
I think it might be a worthwhile thing to put in as an incentive. Because I think if a student is able to appeal for themselves and advocate for themselves as well as with their parents, I think that will really strengthen the student's will to do what needs to be done, and maybe go from that 84% to an 85 or an 86% attendance rate. So I think we should look at an appeals process.
Just to pick up on that, let's look at the second bullet from the bottom. Okay, if the student does not achieve 90% attendance rate, okay. Suppose we had a policy or guidance. Let's not call it policy, but guidance for kids. If the student does not achieve the 90% attendance rate during the first marking period, the student will should know that he may be in danger or he may be in this
Jeopardy.
in jeopardy until the end of the second marking period. We therefore encourage our students to, all right, because many of our kids do not have, I don't want to say many, some of our kids do not have guidance from home, and they cannot give themselves guidance because they don't know what that is.
But they can learn to advocate.
But they can learn to
They can
advocate
learn
for
to
themselves,
advocate.
and they can learn what guidance is. Because you're dealing with a more mature mind,
I think that's.
but still an adolescent.
Yeah, so going back to what Dr. Farrell mentioned in regards to the fourth quarter marking period being something that can trigger eligibility in fall.
For the first.
For the first quarter, being that's the indicator for the first quarter. How do you feel about that? Instead of saying they dipped below 85 last year and they're not in the entire year, but kids know, and on top, to add to that, with technology being what it is today, and this is what really baffles me, is it nothing that we can put together where kids can be held accountable. Hold on a second. They walk around with them every day. Hard. Listen, Oh, I'm at 83. I can't miss another day. I gotta make sure I'm to be eligible for next game. I can't afford any absentees. You know, when we swipe it, I'm at 86. 86 means I have nothing left. If I miss one, I miss the next game. I won't be able to participate. I'm at 90. I'm good. All right. So what does good look like? Because, you know, our kids need to understand what those numbers mean. And if I'm at 80, you've been screwing up. There's a problem.
But you can color
Color coded. Yes.
90, a gold star,
Yes.
85,
Yes.
blue, and then below that, you know, a red, so the kids know that they can.
Mr. Hyde, yes.
So I do like the fourth quarter because now when you really think about it, most school districts, athletic academic policy is based on the fourth quarter.
Good.
For the fall.
For the other schools, yeah, I heard that
For
too.
the fall.
For that fall sport,
Yeah,
absolutely, yes.
That's very normal.
So, Dr. Campbell, you are the boss around here. And I know when we talk about the appeal process, how much did that add to what you're doing? Is it something that's just gonna be a burden? Or is it something that we can assign someone to? Or is it something that, do you feel is doable?
So I want to go back to agreeing with what Madam President said, right? And it's that we need to be able to give kids an opportunity to advocate for themselves. Management, you know, I understand what Mr. Forget is saying, but I do believe that if they're able to have some sort of swipe to help to indicate, so perhaps when they swipe in for school in the morning, they can have some sort of attendance. Right? So once you see the attendance, the daily average or their attendance for the week, for the month, they can self-monitor. And that gives them an opportunity to see where they are. We have an appeal process. It supports their agency and their advocacy. It's more manageable for us, and it's a way for them to take responsibility and ownership. I do believe that it goes to the school counselor as well as the building administration. So that's in the coach in tandem with the cooperating administrator, because it could be fine and performing arts. It could be 11th and 12th grade drama club.
Yeah.
It could be athletics, right? So there needs to be a standard for all of our students.
Okay, Mr. Ford, one more thing I want to say to you. And I think this needs to be put out even more so, because when you said it to me, it blew me away. We need to let people, especially parents, know what that number means. When you say 80, because when I just said 80, you said that's 9 more days. I mean, a kid misses 9 more unexcused days. That's ridiculous.
Half a month.
Exactly. So parents need to understand what that 85% means, what that 83% means, what's that 80% means. Because when you just threw that at me, I mean, a kid misses 9 more unexcused days. That's ridiculous.
Yeah,
Mr.
so
Ford.
this is the piece that I want to be careful. When you say an 80% attendance rate, that's allowing a student to miss 36 days of school year. Okay? Because we have 180 days in the school year. So if we go to 80%, we're allowing a student to be out 36 days of instruction. And by the way the policy is written right now, that's unexcused.
Only on.
In addition to that would be the excuse where the parent submits a note and the child actually is or one of our excuse codes. So there's a possibility that 36 plus the excused days, that scares me,
Yeah.
Mr. Howard. That scares me. It's always scared me when we talk about this policy. But again, this is in your hands and the board's hands at this point, because this is the policy we're discussing.
But one thing
I want
to
to just finish up with the fourth marking period consideration for that participation in first marking period activities. If we do that, are you saying at the end of the third marking period, we're going to analyze the attendance rates of students who want to participate, and any student that falls below 85% must maintain a 90% for that next marking period?
Yes, that's what you were saying, right?
Yeah.
Yes,
I just wanted to be clear.
because the onus has to be on the kids too. Dr. Campbell.
And following up in terms of being very explicit with students, we need to do some sort of attendance campaign where we identify what 10% means, how many days, what an excused absence is,
Yes.
what an unexcused absence is. And that's how we can get students to buy in and understand how many days, what does 85% look like? What is 84? And that
Full
helps the parent.
transparency, absolutely.
We have that.
So make sure we can put it back out to them to show that to the parents, yes.
Mr. Walker?
I would like to add on to what you just said, by perhaps letting the students know the importance of seat time,
Correct.
you know, so that they know that there's a reason why they need to be in the seat, because just through osmosis, or God knows what it might be, they might pick up on something that will improve their region scores or their grades.
Mhm.
The last thing I'm gonna say on this subject, we're talking about absences, but also cuts. How do cuts play in attendance? How are they calculated in?
Okay, so if you have an 8-period day, it's based on the periods and minutes of instruction that the student sat in. So it's based on average daily attendance. So I believe it's after 2.5 hours of instruction, they're considered in attendance for that particular day, but I'd have to go back and look at the actual minutes of instruction required to give student credit for the day.
Okay, so you just spoke
But you
French to
still
me.
have an illegal, a cut is an illegal absence from a course, not for the day.
Right, but it
And then-
takes away from the minutes of instruction for the day.
And sometimes it's the same course that the student is not coming to.
Correct.
But I think what you're saying.
My question is, how is that
So
calculated?
if today,
Okay,
you cut 1 period,
okay,
those minutes are subtracted from the total minutes of instruction for that student for the day.
okay.
There's a benchmark that the student has to hit in order to be considered present
For
on
that
the
day.
day for average daily
Got it.
attendance. I'd have to check that minute.
Okay, so like I said, that was French to me, but not really. But we need to explain that to the parents. They need to understand that this is just not missing school for the day, but if your child cuts 2 or 3 classes during the day, then that's probably gonna add up to about a day. And
Or
that's-
habitually late.
Or habitually late in the morning for first period. Exactly, Dr. Campbell, I mean, Dr. Barrow.
Whatever, whoever.
Yeah.
Or just point at me, it's
Yeah.
okay. The other piece is discipline, and disciplinary consequences are part of the eligibility. You have to be in good academic standing as well as have your attendance. And if you are suspended or have other disciplinary consequences, that can affect your ability to participate. That's where the cuts.
And don't you also have to be
Okay.
in school a certain amount of time on a given day in order to participate?
Say it again,
You have to be in school a certain,
Yes.
no? Okay.
not in our policy.
But you have to be in school the day of.
A lot of districts have that, yeah.
We had it at one time, I believe.
Can you look at that?
It is not in there.
We took it out because of a lot of times for funeral or family
Oh.
emergencies.
Right.
It wasn't.
Shouldn't that be in the
But
bill?
that's an exception. Those are extraordinary circumstances. It's the child, the parent calls the child's not feeling well. And then all of a sudden the child shows up to the game.
I just want to add
Dr. Campbell?
one thing, when you were talking about the cuts.
Yes.
And so I was having a wondering, I know that we have technology that highlights and gives parents an alert via text or telephone call. I know a lot of people do not have home phones. I still do, as well as emails. And perhaps we can adopt a technology, do a home access open house that all the parents can come in, update their information, and they will receive text messages and or emails when students are cutting. I mean, so that's something that we can perhaps move towards.
Right, Mary.
That's a good idea too, Dr. Campbell. So I'm not gonna belabor this. I know we've been here an hour.
Do it. Unless,
So,
can you give it?
Mr. Hodge, you want to touch that up any? Is anything you want to
Yeah,
change it?
we don't have to touch it.
You're gonna take it back. Okay, all right. So we'll bring that back for the next meeting.
So we'll bring it back in a final format for your consideration.
Mhm.
So that if you want to implement changes, because it's June,
Right.
we would have to bring it to the June policy meeting and then to the June board meeting if you wanted it in place for the next school.
Absolutely. I think, Madam President,
We'll work together to come up
Mr.
with
Walker, how you feel about that?
I feel fine about it.
Okay. Thank you everyone for coming out. Meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
Now, they have me passport here for the library committee. We're going to cancel library committee.
Yeah.